service by its very definition has to be a choice. So I think a lot of people feel like if they are service oriented, that they need to help everyone that asks them. And I fundamentally reject that. If there's a mandate, whether it's in your mind or someone else saying, like people used to say to me all the time, but Jonathan, you're the service guy. You know, this person needs help. It's like, there's a lot of people that need help. Of my own free will, I get to say yes or no. I only have so much time, so I need to be strategic with my service. So that's the first part, is you can't miss the strategy involved. That's first and foremost.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to a brand new episode of the None of Your Business podcast. Shawn and Lacey here with you once again. Super pumped up about this episode because we're going to talk about some things that I know that a lot of you talk about, or at least in my work consulting with a lot of you, it's something that I get asked a lot about. You know, we talk a lot about culture, and creating a culture, first of all, is not the easiest thing to do. Especially doing it intentionally. You know, a lot of times we end up with a company culture kind of by accident. Sometimes looking back, we're like, well, that's not the culture that I really wanted to end up with. And oftentimes too, this is a result of maybe not understanding ourselves how to navigate the whole business culture globally. You know, a lot of times we think that in order to get ahead, you're going to have to be cutthroat. You're going to have to step on a couple fingers in order to get to where you want to go. And today's guest is going to talk to us about the possibility that that might not actually be true. So I'm super excited to welcome in Jonathan Kaiser. There he is. What's going on? Welcome to the None of Your Business podcast.
Thank you. Well, thank you for having me, and it's an honor to be on.
You know, we start off every podcast with the exact same question. It's easy to find somebody like yourself that's had success. You know, you've written a book, you speak all over the place. And it's easy for us to fall into the trap of thinking like, well, that must be because, you know, Jonathan's father, Jonathan's mom, you know, they were always in commercial real estate. They're the largest commercial real estate developers on the planet. And they just handed him this whole business. So, of course, it's easy if your name is Jonathan Kaiser. But we oftentimes find out that that's not actually the case. And we love to start off by sharing with our listeners and our viewers your creation story. How do you end up in this place now, where obviously you're a sought after guest on podcasts and sought after around the world for your speeches and for your workshops?
No, absolutely. And I think you're right. I think it is deceiving a lot of times where people just kind of assume that things were handed to you. I had a very unusual upbringing. I was actually raised a Christian missionary kid in Papua New Guinea. My parents taught me to love and serve and give and help. That's what they did their entire life to. When we came back from overseas when I was 11, I had this eye-opening epiphany that we were poor. And I had no sense of the fact of rich, poor, anything like that overseas. And so I decided at an early age, I don't like being poor. I don't want to be poor. What do I got to do to get ahead? So I figured go to a good school. So I went to UCLA. I was going to be an attorney, but my favorite professor talked me out of it. He said, do something that's more entrepreneurial. I had to look up what entrepreneurial meant because I didn't really even know. And I sort of stumbled into commercial real estate. Nobody in my family's ever been in commercial real estate. But a friend of mine said I could make a lot of money in it. So I decided, you know, that sounds good to me because that's my goal. So as I got in, I realized pretty quickly how ruthless it was. I realized how cutthroat the whole industry was, and everybody is just scratching and clawing and fighting their way to the top. And I figured, hey, if this is the game, I'm going to play the game. And again, from my perspective, my parents had it all wrong because their whole philosophy of love and serve led us to the poorhouse. And so here I see a bunch of people being super successful and having a lot of money and doing all the things I wanted to do with my life, and they were the ones behaving in this more cutthroat manner. So I became cutthroat. But as you can imagine, being raised the way I was raised, I was miserable. I was misaligned with my core values, but I felt trapped because I didn't know a different way of doing business. And then 20 years ago, I went to a conference and a speaker started talking about a different way of doing business, a way of succeeding by helping others succeed. And I was just moved and inspired. Sounded like my dad. And I went up to him afterwards and I said, wait a minute. So this isn't just some shtick you say to audiences to sound cool. You actually do this? And he said, yes. And I said, well, how does it actually work? Like, how do you succeed if your focus is on helping other people? And he related it to hunting versus farming. He said, today, Jonathan, you're hunting. And when you're hunting, you have to go out, you have to get a piece of business, you have to close that piece of business, and then you got to go out and do it all over again. So what I'm describing is more like farming. And I live in Arizona, and I have this lemon tree in my backyard. And today it's a monstrosity. But back in the day when it was little, it was this tiny little tree, and the dogs kept trying to rip it up. So I put a little fence around it, hammer those little Home Depot nutrition stakes in the ground, run the drip line. You have to really nurture it, and you don't get anything out of it for a long time. But then all of a sudden, it seems like it starts producing fruit, and then that produces more fruit. And today, if you guys need lemons, you just let me know. I'll send you a truckload. Right? It just comes back in abundance. And so that's how he described it, and it made sense to me. And he said, if you're really playing the long game versus the instant gratification short game, then you can be successful in this manner. And so that was the point where I decided I was going to reinvent myself. I was tired of being the other way. I was tired of feeling like a used car salesman. No offense to all the really ethical used car salesmen out there, and reinvented myself. And from there, it's just been this unbelievable journey to where we are today, to now creating one of the largest independent commercial real estate firms of our kind in the country. And it's all about culture. Right? Everything that we do comes back to we've created a culture that's distinct and unique in an industry that's known for the opposite. And for us, that's our rallying cry. For us, that's our differentiator. For us, that's what we stand for. We're a mission-driven organization that's really focused on transforming the industry, and not just our industry, but other industries that are equally cutthroat that could use the same sort of reinvention as well.
Okay, so before we get to culture, because that is definitely something that I know both Shawn and I want to talk about, I want to unpack a couple of things. First, this is just a very random question. What did your parents do?
When?
Like when you were growing up, what was their job? Because you said they had this idea of like love and serve. And Shawn and I are both chiropractors by profession. And in our world, that is what people say all the time: give, love, serve, give, love, serve. And they struggle with a lot of what you saw when you were being raised. And so I'm just curious, like what industry or profession they were in that they had that ingrained in them.
Well, we were Christian missionaries in Papua New Guinea. So that's where it all kind of started.
Wow.
And then when we came back, my mom was a teacher. She was a Christian school teacher. And my dad worked a bunch of odd jobs, never really had a super stable career, but he was doing different kind of lower level finance roles. So they had poured their heart and soul into being missionaries. And so that's where it all stemmed from at its core.
Yeah. And so I promise I'm going somewhere with this. So the next layer is the people that that Shawn and I work with and serve, again, because they're service-based businesses, they struggle so much with the big service heart, like your parents had too, and then the business side, right? And being able to reconcile those two so that they can have an abundant, fruitful, successful business, but still feel like they're serving. And what I'm hearing you say is that was the reinvention that you had to go through to be able to bring those two components together. So I want you to just talk maybe a little bit more about that, because I know that that's oftentimes a struggle for the people that are listening right now, because they feel like they can't have both.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think it's the biggest, when you're describing the business model, it's the most important thing that has to be really explained, because otherwise it's not clear how it all shakes out. So here's the first thing I would say. The first thing I would say relative to this is service, by its very definition, has to be a choice. So I think a lot of people feel like if they are service oriented, that they need to help everyone that asks them. And I fundamentally reject that. If there's a mandate, whether it's in your mind or someone else saying, like people used to say to me all the time, but Jonathan, you're the service guy. This person needs help. It's like, there's a lot of people that need help. Of my own free will, I get to say yes or no. I only have so much time, so I need to be strategic with my service. So that's the first part, is you can't miss the strategy involved. That's first and foremost. Point number two that I would make is this is the long game. So many people give up too soon. They don't have the staying power, right? They don't stick with it long enough to see the fruits of their investment. These are long. That's why I use the analogy of a tree. This isn't a radish plant that you have a radish in 6 weeks. This isn't that. This is years and years of investing in people. And for me, my transformation, Lacey, was I had to not only reinvent how I did business, I had to also reposition myself in the market from all the people that had thought of me as a shark, because I've been behaving as a shark, and people assume you don't change. So you have to also demonstrate that, and you have to be up to it long enough where the seeds you planted grow into mature trees. So that's the second point I would make. And the third is, I think so much of the time when you're talking about love and serve, it doesn't have any of the strategic mindset behind it. Like, in other words, like I said at the beginning, you have to be able to say yes or no. You have to be able to choose where you serve and what you. But even within that paradigm, you have to be thoughtful and strategic. The way that I serve in commercial real estate, I don't just go out on the street corner and anybody that walks by, I ask them what they need, and then I get started doing it. Like, I could do that. It's probably a good stunt. I might get some press for it, but that's not what we're talking about. What I'm talking about is saying, okay, you're a business person, you're in business, you sell a product or a service or something. You want clients to pay you money for things. Who are the ideal clients and how are you approaching them? All I'm suggesting is that instead of selling them, instead of harassing them as normal salespeople do, what if you spent your time figuring out how to help them without expectation of anything in return? It's a complete flip-flop paradigm. Like, so much of the time I would hear people go, Jonathan, I love that. Everybody that helps me, I help them in return. I'm like, no offense, but it's literally the exact opposite of what I just said, right? Like, I'm leading with service, right?
Right.
I'm starting it. So what you just described is the inevitable 80% ROI on an act of service. 20% of the people won't do anything about it. Will just accept it and move on. And perceptually, there'll be no, I still would fundamentally disagree. You don't get value out of it, but whatever. Perceptually, you don't get any direct return. But 80% of the time, people are wired to want to help in return. So really what you're talking about is activating the law of reciprocity and realizing that if everybody else is waiting for someone to help them before they help back, here's a killer concept. What if you went first? And what if you stopped worrying about whether it came back immediately or not, because it almost never does,
Right.
and just understood that the more you give, the more that you get. I believe that you can't outgive the universe. Now, there are lots of times when the things that I'm doing did not or would not look to the casual observer as if they were in any way, shape, or form furthering any kind of successful commercial real estate career, because they were embedded in acts of service to other people. But to me, that's the ultimate juice. That's the ultimate leverage. It's the ultimate power, whatever word you want to use. To me, selfless service, don't miss this, is selfish. I believe that the most self-interested strategy in the world is to selflessly and strategically help other people. I do not think there's a better bang for your buck. I don't think there's a better ROI in the world. Now, again, you have to be willing to say, I'm playing the long game, not the short game. But the way that you unlock relationships, I used to be a jerk, pretending not to be a jerk, and everybody knew I was a jerk. Now, I'm not a jerk, I don't try to convince anybody whether I am or am not a jerk, and everybody says nice things about me. Why? Because I spend my time helping other people, right? I'm spending my time in service to others. So to me, that's because your question is brilliant, because that's the hardest part. It's like, well, Jonathan, I get it, but I don't want to go broke like Mother Teresa. I have bills to pay. I have a mortgage. I have kids to feed. Yes. So I'm not saying go be reckless and sit in a hut and hum and just ask people what they need. I'm saying not that there's anything wrong with that, but why don't you take your current business, and in every interaction you have with another person, try to figure out 3 ways you can help them. Now that takes listening skills, that takes being present, that takes caring enough to do it. It takes follow through, because saying you're going to do something and not doing it makes it worse. But if you can do all those things, you leave someone with a completely different impression. People are so used to being sold. They're so used to being marketed to. They're so used to the sales gimmick. And then you show up and all you're trying to do is help them in material ways. And then they leave you and they get these acts of service via email or text or whatever. And they're like, who are you? Like, what are you doing? This is crazy. You do that enough times and everybody starts talking about how you're the crazy, people call me it started out as a dig. People would call me the free community concierge. So I just leaned in. I said, I'm your free community concierge.
Nice.
You need anything, you call me. And so now people come to town. They're like, hey, there's this guy. You got to call him. Jonathan Kaiser, most connected guy in town. You got to call him. I'm not saying that. They're saying that. And why are they saying that? Is because I spend my time helping all those people. And it creates this kind of cacophony of volume of, that's a good guy. You can trust him. He's helping everybody. And oh, by the way, he does commercial real estate.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely love that. You have a book. You don't have to be ruthless to win. First of all, I need to know, Jonathan, what town are you in case I come to town? I got to know who to call.
Scottsdale, man. It's anywhere, any greater Phoenix. If you come to Arizona, you call me. I got lots of juice here, brother. I'll help you out.
Perfect. So I want everybody to check out the book. It's available on Amazon. You don't have to be ruthless to win. Now, we have this whole idea of selfless service, but then we have this word. I want to talk about this word ruthless. You said that selfless service is selfish. And so we're talking about this concept of giving selflessly, making the first move. But you're also saying that in your past, in your previous persona, you were ruthless. I would love to know what does that mean to be ruthless? And I would love to know, is that the opposite of selfless service?
Well, I would say the opposite of selfless service is selfish service, right? So we're getting into nuanced wordplay here, but if you do everything just for your own benefit, to me, that's the opposite of selfless. Because to me, what selfless means is you're putting the needs of the other party first. So that to me is the opposite. I think the opposite of ruthless would be kind, gracious, generous, not to take advantage of folks. To me, that would be that opposite. But I think your point is a very valid one and a good one, because in my experience, being ruthless has a lot of forms. So if you just talk about it as pure selfishness, willing to do whatever it takes to get what you want without fear of consequence or violating societal norms or hurting other people or whatever. And I don't even mean in a violent way. I just mean like playing zero-sum game mindset. For me in commercial real estate, what my company does, and what I was doing before I started my own company, was I was helping companies acquire space for their business, whether they're leasing it, whether they're purchasing it. So within that context, I'm in a commission environment. So the bigger the deal, the longer the lease, the more they pay in rent, the more that I make. That was the structure. And so for me, being ruthless, one example would be, I'll tell you a story. So let me change the name. So let's just say her name was Lisa. So Lisa was the CEO of a fast-growing technology company. And they had raised a decent amount of money and they were looking to grow. They needed to hire a bunch of people. So they needed space to put those people in. And I ended up talking her into hiring me. She hired me. And I ended up talking her into signing a 10-year lease on more space than she needed at the most expensive building in the submarket. Why? Did I do that because I was really looking out for Lisa's best interest and thinking about, wow, if she, with her rapid growth, she's probably going to rapidly outgrow this space in 3 years, much less 10 years. Does she really need to be in this expensive of a building? I was thinking about me. I was doing the calculations of, okay, 10-year lease, that means double the commission of a 5-year lease, expensive space, higher rates, that's more commission for me. So everything was about me. Everything was about me. And within the environment, there's very few rules in a traditional firm. And so you have people just scratching and clawing for deals. So that means you do whatever's in your power, if you're ruthless like I used to be, to get deals at your coworkers' expenses. And that includes, stopping by their desk, trying to listen to conversations, trying to see who they might be targeting so you can try to get to them first. So it's just this hyper competitive dog eat dog environment. And for me, that was just the normal. That's what I saw, in my opinion. It's not true that everybody was doing it, or a lot of people that were trying to be the good guys or good gals and didn't get as far ahead. But I saw this as the path to success. So for me, if you look at the way that we behave now, it's literally the opposite. Like our firm, one, we only represent the corporate user of space or the tenant. Commercial real estate is kind of a scam. That the majority of the big firms, they primarily represent all these landlords and developers and real estate investors. And then they go to these tenants and they say they're going to help these tenants get the best deal. But the reality is they're representing these tenants against their long-term current and future clients. It's just kind of it's a big, it's a conflict of interest case study, our industry. So we only represent the tenant. And our whole mindset is, what's the best thing for you as the company? Because if I do the best thing for you and it positions you for your success, you're going to love me. I'm never going to lose clients. You're going to tell all your friends about me. And so for us, the value proposition when Lisa called me on the first strategy, on the ruthless strategy, Lisa called me one day crying, going, Jonathan, why did you put me in this horrendous deal? I didn't realize until now. I thought you were on my side. Like, that's one reaction. That's no more business from Lisa. She's going to tell all her friends I suck, right? That's the downstream effect of ruthless behavior. Today, people go, oh my gosh, we interacted with all these brokers. They were all self-serving, all sharks. And then we met JK. Everybody calls me JK. Then we met JK. And man, he helped us. And he saved us money. And he put us in a situation that's best for us, not for him. And he didn't even make a lot of money doing it. And so then they feel bad. They're like trying to get me more business because they're telling all their friends, this guy's awesome. Work with him. He'll help you and he'll save you some money. So you do that long enough to long-winded answer your question. You do that long enough, and I believe that you create the necessary goodwill to truly create a long-term thriving business. And that's what we've done. So we're referral only. We don't cold call. Everything, our selling is serving. Our selling is going above and beyond for companies and trying to help them as best as we can. Now, are we perfect? No, of course not. But we are really, really committed to helping the community, willing to help anybody that reaches out to help within reason, and making sure that our clients get ridiculously good deals. And so for me, that's my definition of service. That could be a very different definition for someone else. And so there's no one definition. But in my world, from the place that I come from, that's how I describe it. Good question.
Yeah, I love that. And I want to now, like, as we're nearing the end here, bring it all together, because I think this is vitally important. One of the things that we talked about at the very beginning is this idea of culture. And what you're saying is that in your industry, in your world, coming from a place of selfless service is against the norm. Probably most people that are in your industry aren't used to working in that type of environment. And you kept saying like we, so that inherently means your team and the people that work with you. How did you take this idea and this concept after you reinvented yourself and infuse that culture into a team so that they got behind it as well? Because people definitely, as entrepreneurs, struggle with what they believe and how they want to interact with their clients and bringing that to make sure that it's infused into everybody that works with them.
Well, I can see why you both have a successful podcast, because that is a brilliant, brilliant question. And I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think culture is everything. And if we had 2 hours to pontificate, I could answer in a lot more thorough manner, but we don't. So the first thing that I would say is the fish rots from the head. You as the entrepreneur, whoever's listening, you have to be the change you want to see in your company. You know, like Gandhi said, be the change you want to see in the world. So we have 3 levels of reinvention. Starts with yourself. Has to start here. Then you create a company culture around it, which we'll talk more about that in a second. And then that's how you make sure all the interactions with the community. So it's like radiating out, inside out. And it's that inside out revolution that's required for true transformation, because a lot of companies, they decide that words on a wall are what they're about, but then the leaders don't live it and nobody lives it, and it ends up being a bunch of hogwash. And that's the majority of companies. And so, you know, talk is cheap, and especially when it's catchy these days to say our culture's great. A lot of the times that's a bunch of nonsense. So for me, how we did it, again, this is just my journey. There's 1,000 ways to Rome. This is just mine. I decided that from the beginning, I was going to create a very clear set of operating principles. So we created 15 core operating principles for the company that guide all of our behavior. They guide everything from how we interact with clients to how we interact with each other, and what we do in meetings and what we don't do in meetings. And it's a pretty comprehensive list. And it was created from my realization, my epiphany of, if I'm going to create a firm that's going to be disruptive, what is the sort of idyllic, optimal, utopian view that I could create, and how do I build around that? So that's point number 2. And I could, again, pontificate long on that. Third is you have to hire the right people. This is a hard lesson that I learned. I thought that I could be a transformational agent in a lot of people's lives. I thought that if someone was enticed by the concept of doing business a different way, and it was through this, you know, model that we espouse, this selfless service model, I thought that if people leaned in, they could transform. But what I found was I got a lot of lip service, and unfortunately, I let people in the organization that weren't good cultural fits, that when the rubber met the road, didn't live it. So I had to part ways with them, which is always hard, right? So I think that there are a lot of people, to answer your question directly, that in their minds feel like what I'm describing is a cool idea. Ooh, I love that. That sounds good. It feels good inside and blah, blah, blah. But then when the rubber meets the road and they're thinking, if I don't get this deal closed and I don't get that commission, I'm not going to be able to put in that pool or buy the house or whatever their objectives are financially. And so they sacrifice the culture in those moments of stress for ruthless behavior. So what you really have to do is you have to have people that are long-term view folks that are part of the team, and you got to constantly, every single meeting, you have to keep the culture alive. I view myself as the chief culture officer. My job is to make sure that I'm living it, I'm articulating it, I'm holding people accountable to it, that we are actively keeping it alive, because otherwise it's sort of like a banana, right? It fades, it rots, it's not good in a week. So if you just think you can set up a culture once and then you're all set, you know, it has to be reactivated, always recreated within the organization. And you have to be very intentional about what that is, because there's so much watered down and diluted culture out there that, you know, employees are wise to it now. They know the truth from the BS. And So if you do the right thing, if you have the right culture, the word spreads and it attracts people to you, and it attracts the right kind of people. Because that was the other thing we did, is we tried to be very overt with our messaging. I mean, here I am, a commercial real estate firm, launching a new firm, and I'm writing love and serve. You know, like, people thought I was crazy. Like, those aren't words you use in commercial real estate. But what it did is it, for the most part, had a magnetic effect. It attracted the right people and rejected the wrong.
All right. So the book, it's available on Amazon. You don't have to be ruthless to win. But you offer, it's interesting. So you actually just said this, that you have commercial real estate and have found tremendous success there. But you're also tying it in with, the book isn't about commercial real estate. The book is this idea of selfless service. And so I think that for everybody that's listening, one of those two avenues is something that they can benefit from. So listen, I know a lot of our listeners, they, one, love to invest in commercial real estate. Two, because they might have a brick and mortar on the side of the service that they're providing, might be able to benefit from your services as well. How can people connect with you on one or the other, or both?
Yeah, sure. So the first one is easy. You know, you don't have to be ruthless to win, is on Amazon. We also set up a website, ruthlessbook.com. If you want a signed version, you can go there and I'll get you one. On the commercial real estate front, what we find is that most tenants are in lease arrangements that are dramatically worse than they could be if negotiated properly. And so we offer, for anybody who's listening today, we offer a free real estate review. Some people call it a real estate health check. That's just a free analysis of your current real estate leases or current real estate situation, whether it's office, industrial, healthcare, retail, where we'll take a free look as experts and just say, here's maybe some ideas on what you could think about in the future, or if you have an immediate need, or if you're looking to open up new locations around the world. You know, we have 570 people worldwide if you include our global partners. So we have a global footprint, and anybody that has a real estate need or just would like to take advantage of the free real estate health check, we're happy to provide it. The name of the company is Kaiser. That's spelled the right way, not like the hospital. So it's Keyser, www.kaiser.com, Keyser. And my email address is jk@kaiser.com. So if anybody wants to send me a note offline as well, happy to communicate with you there as well.
You know, he also provides workshops if you need some help putting together culture. That's at jonathankaiser.com. You can find out tons of information. Yes.
Love it.
Jonathan, you absolutely killed it. Thanks so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor.
All right, everybody. Well, we'll be back again next week. I don't know how we'll top this one, but Lacey and I will give it a go. Make sure you tune in. Then we'll be back with a brand new episode of the None of Your Business podcast.
You tell all of your guests that, don't you?
No.
Oh.